and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. You know, there's so much to get done in the fall, and one job that you could do now to save yourself some time in the spring is getting your fall herbicides applied and putting some residuals out in the field. We'll talk about where this may apply for your farm and how to get them to work.
Well, another thing you could do this fall is apply nitrogen, but should you? We're going to talk today about how much nitrogen your soil can hold and whether or not it's a good idea to apply fall nitrogen.
Got a tough to control weed of the week today, but first, here's our Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about the Ag PhD Harvest Loss app, and here are the three important numbers you need to remember: 2, 4, and 16.
So at harvest time, you need a couple of tools. One, you need a square like this. It's a 1-foot square that we built out of PVC. Works great. You just throw it down on the ground, and then you count how many kernels you're seeing. Now, depending on the crop, as Brian mentioned, if you know the numbers 2, 4, and 16, well, you've got it down for corn, soybeans, and wheat. For corn, if you find 2 kernels in this 1 square foot, that's roughly 1 bushel per acre of loss. If you find 4 soybeans in this square foot, that would be roughly a bushel loss, and 16 kernels of wheat would equal roughly 1 bushel of loss.
You can also use the Ag PhD Harvest Loss app if you want to. It's a free app for your smartphone or your tablet. And just plug in, hey, I've got this crop. This is how many kernels I'm counting in that square foot. You can also put in what's the value of that crop per bushel, so then you know exactly how many dollars per acre you're losing.
Well, I think that's the important thing, because let's face it, when it gets to harvest time, we just want to roll. And I remember a few years back, I jumped in the combine with somebody, and there were some soybeans that were kind of lodged in one area of the field. And as we were going through, I was just watching, looking down from the combine, and I said, man, it looks like there's a lot of beans that were dropping on the ground. And he said, no, it's no big deal. And I said, why don't you just stop the combine for a minute? And I got out and I threw my square down, and we had 28 soybeans in the first square foot that I looked at. 28. Well, that's roughly 7 bushels of soybeans. Soybeans were somewhere in the $10 range, and I said, this is $70 an acre that we just dropped on the ground. And the guy said, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to start going just one way through this pass, and let's see how we do with that. So instead of going against the lean, we started to attack it. So they were leaning towards the east in that case. So we just combined that part of the soybean field from the east. And we got out and we looked, and we were dropping about 1 bushel per acre. So it was a $60 an acre difference to just run the combine one way. But you know what? If we wouldn't have gotten out and measured that, we really wouldn't have known. And just to see, there's some soybeans on the ground, it's no big deal, to actually put the dollars to it, got the combine to actually stop and try and do things the right way.
So here at Ag PhD, we talk often about all these production factors that the farmer needs to be watching all during the growing season to have the best crop at the end of the year. But you know what? That can all be ruined if the farmer isn't paying very close attention to what he has for harvest loss when he's going through the field in the fall. That's why we developed the free Ag PhD Harvest Loss Calculator. Hopefully that can help you on your farm, or if you're a non-farmer, at least you understand how big a deal this is now. You can have many dollars just laying on the ground at the end of the season that does you no good as the farmer. So that's why the farmer has to really pay attention to those types of things.
Now, one other thing you'll be wanting to watch very close on your farm is weed control, especially if you have our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to control it later in the show.
With new seed traits and chemistries entering the market, your crop protection equipment needs precision and adaptability. Hypro Innovative Spray Technologies has the products to give your applications greater accuracy, less drift, and more coverage. Hypro, right on technology, right on target.
We farm mostly soybeans, probably a third of it is corn. We switched to the Liberty Link trait about 5 years ago. We've had real good success with it. It's helped us control our weeds. Our biggest weed challenge would be the pigweed, and we get our fields clean when we start, and then we usually try to come back 28 to 30 days after planting with our Liberty and a Post emerged. And the Liberty is just easier, and we don't have to be a chemist to mix our chemical. Very simple, and it works. It's all done real well, and we're just very happy with the Liberty Link system.
The Liberty Link system, a simply better solution, now backed by the Liberty Weed Control Guarantee, because Liberty is simply better weed control by Bayer.
Are you storing grain in your bin from last harvest? You will want to avoid running your bin fans when the air is warm and wet to avoid sprouting and spoilage. The AgriDry Bullseye Controller has the capability to automatically run your fans when the weather conditions are safe for quality grain control. Stop monitoring the weather or babysitting your bins and let the Bullseye Controller keep your grain safe. Visit agridryllc.com to find your local dealer today.
For lower costs, higher production, Mandico Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Avoid costly downtime with Twister's ease of maintenance. Its unique Coulter suspension allows it to follow the contour of the field yet remain forgiving in rocks. Our hydraulically adjustable Coulter angles mean you never leave the cab, making residue management easier, more efficient. Spring or fall, the Mandico Twister is the new leader. Check with your local dealer or visit mandicoagri.com.
At Fisher Tradition Farms, we Verus all of our acres, and any new additional acres are automatically Verus. Verus maps allow us to know exactly where our soil types change and how much they change. We use AgroLiquid's Enhance, High Energy N, and Access that allows us to add sulfur. We can customize our AgroLiquid products on a per pound, per acre basis as needed.
Each fall, Darren and I get a lot of questions about, hey, should I be putting nitrogen out in the fall, or should I just wait until spring? Or for that matter, how much can I put on safely in the fall? So we want to kind of talk through those issues today.
This fall application topic. You know, when we think about nutrients, a lot of times it's P and K that we're putting on in the fall because frankly, they don't move very much in the soil. So big deal. We put them out in the fall, they're still going to be there in the spring. With nitrogen, it gets to be a little bit iffy because, of course, in the nitrate form, where it has a negative electrical charge, it can move down through soil. Why is that possible? Well, because soil has a negative charge. So if we've got the wrong form of nitrogen, things could get ugly pretty fast out on the farm.
Basically, nitrogen is in two different forms in the soil typically. We're talking nitrate and ammonium. Those are the two main forms that we like to discuss on the farm. Well, the nitrate has a negative charge, soil has a negative charge, so the soil is literally repelling that nitrate and pushing it right out. Now, unfortunately, nitrogen can change forms in the soil. You've got bacteria, and it changes a lot depending on heat. And also, let me just say this. There are a lot of people that say, once it's 50 degrees in the fall and the temperature is falling, you're safe to put nitrogen on. That's not true. Nitrogen is going to continue converting at least a little bit to other forms because bacteria don't just stop when it's 50 degrees. They don't just say, well, time to check out. No, it's all the way down to 32 degrees. Once you're at 32 degrees, then there's basically almost nothing in terms of nitrogen conversion. So what I'm trying to say is 50 a good temp to start at for fall applications of nitrogen? Yeah, that's pretty good. But what would be better is 45. What would be better yet is 40. What would be even better is 35. You see where I'm going with this? Not until you get to 32 are you actually really safe.
Well, this is a big deal because, you know, when you start harvest out, people want to get things done. Hold your horses just a little bit. Maybe there's some other jobs that can be done and the fertilizer thing could be put off as long as possible. The other thing is going to come down to what form of fertilizer you're going to put out in the field and how you're going to protect it. Brian mentioned the ammonium form of nitrogen versus the nitrate form. Well, keeping products in the ammonium form longer, even if you choose the right product, stabilizers can certainly help. When we look at anhydrous ammonia, there are things like N-Serve that can be used in other forms of nitrogen, like urea, for example. You could use something like an Agrotane or an Instinct. Even manure, when we're putting that out in the field in the fall, that can be stabilized and protected. Products like More Than Manure or Instinct 2 could be used to help keep those nutrients safe from leaching and from tie-up in the field.
But in addition to using a nitrogen stabilizer, you have to use the right form. So for example, we don't recommend you use liquid 28% at all in the fall. We're not real big believers in using urea at all in the fall. The only form of nitrogen that we will use on our own farm in the fall is anhydrous ammonia, because that quickly converts over to ammonium and basically locks onto your soil. So as long as you do this shortly before freeze up, you're usually relatively safe. But let's talk about the general rule we always have for how much nitrogen can your soil really hold. Well, take a look at your cation exchange capacity, or CEC for short. Take 10 times your CEC, that'll tell you roughly how much nitrogen your soil can hold at any one time. So if you've got a CEC of 12, 12 times 10 is 120. So 120 pounds is the most I would be willing to put on that soil at any one time. And for that matter, I really probably wouldn't even put that much on, because there's usually some nitrogen already in the ground. So if I can hold 120 and I've already got 30 in the soil, that means I should only apply about 90 pounds.
Well, the other thing is where you're going to apply it. So Brian talked a little about soil type, but on our farm, we're really looking at where does this land lay? Now, if we've got upland ground that we know isn't going to flood and we know we're going to get out there early in the spring, that's a good spot for fall nutrient applications. When we've got ground that's low lying, and even if you say, well, it only floods 1 out of 10 years, who knows? This could be the year that it happens. And you know what? The economics just aren't that great right now that we can just waste a whole bunch of money out on the farm. The other side of it too is, environmentally speaking, we really don't want to do things that aren't prudent on our farm. So when you've got low-lying ground, that's definitely not a place for fall nutrient applications, which is really common sense and everybody already knows.
Well, once again, I guess we just want to stress to you, hey, take a look at your cation exchange capacity. You don't want to exceed, in terms of nitrogen application, what your soil can hold, but then be smart about where you're applying your nitrogen, use a nitrogen stabilizer, and use the right form of nitrogen for the right situation.
And if you are putting nitrogen out in the fall, it may help you with your burn down on weeds like our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
I would recommend Morton for many reasons, but one is that they have a long history of standing behind their buildings.
Our sales experience with Morton was a nice experience. You know, they told us what it was going to cost, what it was going to be, you know, how it was going to run, and it worked out really well for us.
Morton has built me one heck of a nice building, and it should stand for a very, very long time. I was very happy with the workmanship.
Check us out online at mortonbuildings.com.
We had super dry conditions right at the end of the fall, probably some driest corn we've harvested. Head shell was almost nil, very minimal. We were down to a kernel or less per square foot with this head, and normally we thought we were doing good keeping down to that 3 kernels per square feet with our previous head. Whether the corn's worth $3, $6, or $8 a bushel, definitely puts more money in our pocket at the end of the day.
Are you looking for an easy way to apply dry powdered products to your stored grain? Do you want to use the applicator recommended by industry leaders for products like Diacon-D and other dry powder products? Changing Time CT applicators successfully apply a diversity of products quickly, easily, and accurately. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, inoculants, fertilizers, and other dry products. For commercial use or on the farm, you need the applicator industry leaders are using. CT applicators for the changing times.
Compaction created during planting leaves thousands of dollars of potential yield in your fields. Copperhead Ag has developed the Furrow Cruiser spiked closing wheel to close the seed trench more effectively. With a unique combination of closing power and control, the Furrow Cruiser provides earlier, more even emergence and higher stand counts, returning yield potential and putting profit back in your pocket. For more information on why you should never run a traditional closing system again, visit copperheadag.com.
Take a look inside any rotary combine and you'll find single rotor technology.
Technology Case IH introduced over 35 years ago with the Axial Flow Combine. But unless it gives you more bells and whistles with fewer belts and chains, more power using less fuel, it's not an Axial Flow. Because while the heart of every rotary combine beats red, only Case IH gives you the power to do more.
One of my favorite discussions every year with crop protection manufacturers or even agronomists from around the country is they'll say, well boy, if we could just get farmers to put on more residual herbicides in the fall, they'd have a lot fewer weed problems come spring. And I try to remind these guys, hey, we farm too. You know what time of year we don't have time to go spraying? In the fall. So how are we going to get this done? But unfortunately, we've got a lot of weed problems now, so many people are saying, you know what, I'm willing to take a day or two and just shut the combine off and go spray, but how do I really make those fall residual herbicides work? We want to talk about that today.
Well, when you said take a day or two off from harvest, I thought that was kind of an interesting point, Brian. Now, if you're all done with harvest, great. Then you've got some time you can choose to do what's going to pay your farm the best. But even if you are still harvesting, you may say, well, I don't want to stop the combine. Spraying your whole farm may only take a couple of days, depending on the size of your farm. So you could really get a lot done if that was a smart thing for you to do. Now, if you are going to use soil residual herbicides, in many cases, the products that we're using are not going to burn down weeds that are already up. So if you've got some winter annuals out there, you're probably going to have to add something in, maybe a 2,4-D, maybe a dicamba, something like that, to add some burn to control those winter annuals right now. But when we're looking at the soil residual herbicides that just want to set us up for a good spring, so we can just get out there and plant and not have to worry about applying residuals in the spring. You know, we're looking at things in corn like a dual, for example, has been used for many years in this role. It's a group 15, so it's going to last for quite a while in the soil. Again, no burn down activity, but you're going to get that early control on early germinating weeds.
All right, here are the keys though. Number one, you have to make sure you're using a higher rate than normal or the highest labeled rate. So we don't ever want to exceed the highest labeled rate, but just make sure you keep your rate up because there's a very good chance you're going to lose a little bit of that herbicide between now and spring. Another important thing is put it where you're not going to flood out. So you've got to make sure that you can get into that ground early in the spring and get a crop on there. Remember that the best weed killer there is, way better than a herbicide, is crop canopy. So we don't mind so much that, oh, this herbicide might run out a little earlier than the next one if we can get a crop up and growing. My point is you want to spray your fields where you know you can get in and you know you can get in early in the spring. Get that done and you should be in good shape.
Well, Brian, what about the guy that wants to kill two jobs at once and impregnate this pre-emerge herbicide on dry fertilizer they're putting out there?
Not a big believer, because if you look at what your spread pattern is for dry, it's not nearly as good as your spread pattern for liquid. Just think of how few fertilizer granules you have compared to the billions of tiny little droplets of herbicide. You're going to have way better coverage if you go liquid.
So if you spray it separate and then spread the fertilizer separate,
much better performance.
It is two passes across the field, but you're going to get a lot better performance out of the herbicide. Yep. The fertilizer, it doesn't really matter one way or the other, but the herbicide, it's a big deal.
Yes, absolutely. So keep those two things separate.
All right, how about working it in the fall?
Yeah, you can do that. Otherwise, rain will work a lot of these things in too. So if you've got steep ground, then I worry about it running down the hill. But you know, by the same token, if you have steep ground and you work it, now you might end up with more erosion. So there's no easy answer on that steep ground. But all I can tell you is usually rain and snow will work your herbicide in, depending on the product. There are only a few that have high vapor pressure like Treflan or Eradicane.
Well, the crop residue is really the big thing, especially if you're out there in a heavy residue, no-till type situation. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I don't worry all that much about the residue. The herbicide will work its way through the residue over time, so it's generally no big deal.
Well, to wrap things up, if we're going to use fall herbicides, they definitely can be used when we're talking about the residual products. We want things that don't have a high vapor pressure, so we can just lay them out there if we need to. And we want to put it on upland ground where we know we aren't going to flood out, and it's going to work better if we're using higher rates and planting early in those fields next spring.
Well, you may need a fall residual herbicide if you've got our Weed of the Week. We'll talk about it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you.
Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Our weed of the week is velvet leaf.
Velvet leaf's one of my favorite weeds, Brian, because there are some really great options to control it. We raise primarily corn and soybeans, and when we look at post-emerge options for controlling velvet leaf, there are some great ones, and they're relatively inexpensive. The other thing, we were talking about pre's earlier on the show today, and when we think about pre-emerge products, there are some good choices that have a high impact on velvet leaf pressure. So if you've got a big velvet leaf problem across your farm, you really shouldn't. There are some options that you can use to try and get this weed under control.
Yeah, there really are, especially compared to what we had 20, 30 years ago. There wasn't much out there at all. Now, let me say too, before we get into these pre-emerge options, Roundup is not that great, as you probably are already aware. One of the issues that we have is just if you're spraying anytime other than the middle of the day, the velvet leaf kind of droops, so it's hard to get good coverage on there. But other than that, Roundup just isn't that effective on velvet leaf.
All right, so let's talk about pre-emerge herbicides. When we look at corn, there are some really good ones. I like anything with an HPPD in it, pre-emerge. So when you look at Balance Flex, or you look at any of the combinations that have balance in them, they work well. Also the products that have mesotrione in them, those work nicely too. Here's the other thing though. You can use something like Triple Flex or Sure Start that has Python in it. And Python has been highly effective on velvet leaf. So you've got a few choices there. If you want to use HPPD's post, that would be my recommendation because I think they are the best on velvet leaf and corn. So I would use Triple Flex or Sure Start to start with. Now, those products are going to work better in high pH soil. Python works really well if your pH is above 7. It's still going to work in a lower pH soil. It's just going to work better when you have high pH ground.
The other thing I guess I'd add to that is post-emerge, throw a little atrazine with your HPPD. That will really bump up the performance. Now on soybeans, we talk often about our 3 pre's. We want a yellow, we want metribuzin, we want either Authority or Valor. Well, guess what? None of those are tremendously effective on velvet leaf. Probably the best thing in there would be the metribuzin. So what are you going to do in those cases? Well, you could add Python, just like in corn. The nice thing with Python, it can be used in corn or soybeans. Now don't use Sure Start or Triple Flex in your soybeans, that'll kill them. But use some Python in your soybeans, that will really help.
All right, but post-emerge, we got some great options, and the best two are labeled up to 36-inch tall velvet leaf. So we've got Resource and we've got Cadet. They both are excellent velvet leaf products. That is the weed that they are the best on. When we turn to wheat, we don't normally have a big velvet leaf issue in wheat. You could start off with Sharpen pre-emerge and then come back with Husky post.
Well, the great thing about velvet leaf is we do have good control options in just about every crop now, so it doesn't have to be a big problem on your farm.
That's all time we have for this week's weed, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
For lower costs, higher production, Mandico Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Avoid costly downtime with Twister's ease of maintenance. Its unique Coulter suspension allows it to follow the contour of the field yet remain forgiving in rocks. Our hydraulically adjustable Coulter angles mean you never leave the cab, making residue management easier, more efficient. Spring or fall, the Mandico Twister is the new leader. Check with your local dealer or visit mandicoagri.com.
Take a look inside any rotary combine and you'll find single rotor technology. Technology Case IH introduced over 35 years ago with the axial flow combine. But unless it gives you more bells and whistles with fewer belts and chains, more power using less fuel, it's not an axial flow. Because while the heart of every rotary combine beats red, only Case IH gives you the power to do more.
We have a school and a church nearby. I actually go to the classroom to educate the students about what's going on here on my farm. The system that I have, I tie everything together. No-till, cover crops. We applied AgriLiquid in furrow with our soybeans this year. It seemed like they jumped out of the soil, even though we had the record rainfall. I really feel that I'm feeding my plant on a consistent year-round basis throughout the growing season.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
There are trillions of hard-working microbes right beneath your feet. Today, Monsanto BioAg is harnessing the power of microbes, creating microscopic farmhands that help plants access nutrients, enhance root and shoot growth, and handle stressful conditions throughout the season, protecting and maximizing your yield potential. We're turning 500 trillion microbes into 500 trillion new farmhands, ready for work. Nature, it's powerful technology.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
Anhydrous ammonia applications are going down in popularity due to regulations, the cost for dealers to offer and insure the product, and the safety of use compared to other nitrogen alternatives. However, anhydrous is sometimes a considerably cheaper alternative. While we can't control the politics or the costs, we can take steps to increase user safety. That's the topic of today's Iron Talk. The word anhydrous means without water. When it comes into contact with your skin, it can rapidly dehydrate and cause severe burns. The first thing to do is use personal protection. Wear tight-fitting, chemical-proof goggles or a full-face respirator. Rubber gloves that protect against ammonia are also a must. Coveralls or a heavy work shirt are advised as well. Begin by inspecting the equipment before each use. Look for cracks on hoses or signs of wear or slippage around couplers. While most experienced operators aren't scared of a little product in the lines, you are taking a risk if you don't purge the lines each time that you unhook or inspect them. Check the toolbar quick coupler regularly and replace as recommended or as wear dictates. When switching from tank to tank, make sure that your hoses are the proper length. Also, always use the safety chains and hitch pin with safety clip to ensure that the hoses aren't stretched and that a tank never comes unhooked. When moving to and from fields, never exceed 25 miles per hour. If you follow these recommendations, accidents are unlikely, but if you do have one, farmers and custom applicators are required to report the incident to regulatory agencies. So be careful and be safe if using anhydrous ammonia this fall. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. But if you ever have a question for us here at Ag PhD, you can call into the Ag PhD radio show. We take your live phone calls each weekday at 2 p.m. Central on SiriusXM Channel 147.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
A healthy soil helps to keep our air and water clean while providing a medium for productive crops, pastures, and shelter belts. It takes good management practices and care to accomplish this. To learn more about how farmers are improving the health of their soils, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.